Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie. And of course that makes this Circles and Squares. We're on episode 13. Kate, how you feeling?
I am feeling fantastic. If you listened to last episode, you know that we just recorded that on the same day, our little bonus episode for the big PlayStation 5 reveal, so we're both hyped coming off of that,
yes.
But excited to also talk about the things we are currently playing in the regular show.
Yeah, so just for those of you that didn't see it, we did do a bonus episode back on, what day is it today anyway? It's Wednesday, right?
Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. Back on Wednesday, the 16th, there was the PS5 event, and we usually do a 3-segment show where we talk about the games we're playing, then we go to the news, and then have a breakout kind of random topic discussion at the end. We decided to move our news segment for this week over to its own special episode just to get it out on time with the PS5 reveal. So this one might be a bit shorter. We're just going to tell you about the games we've been playing. We'll have a short intermission, and then we're going to talk about the use of guides in video games, and then close the show out with a listener mail question. So again, if you want to hear our thoughts on the PS5 reveal event, pre-orders, the console, the price, all that stuff, just go on our podcast feed and you should find it. It's right there. So we're also on YouTube as well, of course. You can find all our links on Twitter at CANDSpod. You can also find us on Instagram under the same name. And, tell a friend about the show. You know what I mean? Like pass our feed on to someone else who likes games, and you never know, they might start listening too, right? That's what we're hoping. Anyways, Kate, so we're going to get into the games we've been playing here. And I would like to tell you about Spiritfarer. So what do you know? Have you seen much?
I did see a little bit. I actually did download and play the demo for Spiritfarer, so I'm not...
Oh, you did?
Yeah, you did,
Okay,
yeah.
so tell us about the demo before I get into my full thoughts.
Well, the demo is really interesting. I'm still not 100% sure what the game is about, so I've been interested to hear if you can clarify that a little more.
Let me start with what it's about. Let me do that first.
Do.
So basically what this is, you know how, I forget the exact names. I think it's the river Styx, kind of...
Yep.
In hell, or like you get rowed down
where you
there.
get ferried down to the afterlife.
So you get transferred your spirit to the afterlife or whatever it is. So that's what this is. It's just not really demonic and evil. It's more like a happy story
kind
of thing.
It almost like kind of like looks and has the feel of like being in a Disney or Pixar movie or something.
100%. So basically, you're the ferryman. You play as a girl named Stella, and she is the new River Styx ferryman driver who's going to take these spirits. She's going to help them complete maybe their final wishes of what they need to do before they transfer over to the spirit world. So you're kind of just getting these people on your boat, helping them out with a few requests, getting to know them a bit, and then taking them to the gate where they can pass along. So there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the general overview. So what did you think of the demo?
I really enjoyed it. It had a really nice atmosphere, which I think was the main thing I liked. It struck me as, and I wanted to compare it the whole time to something like Animal Crossing or like a Stardew Valley kind of thing. And I think those are good comparisons in terms of like the general like vibe and atmosphere, and it being kind of like a relaxed game where like it's nice after a long day. You don't really want to have like tons of stress, or like maybe it's a good thing to play. You're watching something TV in the background. But it doesn't play like either of those games.
No, it's very different than those for sure.
Yeah, like it doesn't play like the core.
It's completely side-scrolling, right? It's just like a side-scrolling platformer, basically, in terms of like its controls. It's not a platformer, but or it's got very light kind of elements of platforming, but it's just like a 2D. You're on a boat, you can go up and down, left and right.
Yeah, it seemed like, or at least in the demo, a lot of it was just talking to other people and like maybe trying to figure out kind of what things they like, what they dislike, and like helping them out with activities, and then some small like mini game sort of style like things you can do around your ship to improve
so the way it works basically is you get the ship, and then you get introduced to a few characters who come on the ship, or there's one specifically you get, and they're all anthropomorphic animal kind of characters, which is probably the one part of the game that's a little off-putting to me. They're just a bit too humanoid in a lot of cases.
One is like definitely like 3 snakes in a trench coat as well.
Totally.
He was my favorite part of the demo.
Yeah, totally. So you get these first few people, and they're kind of like tutorials almost. You learn what to do. So you're right, there's lots of mini games you engage with on the boat. So at first you can fish off the back and you can catch fish. Eventually you build a kitchen, so you start cooking food for everyone who's on the boat, and you can use the different fish or ingredients you might grow. You can make a field on your boat or a garden, and you just start kind of accumulating different ingredients so you can start cooking. And then basically how it works is each new animal or spirit you get on the boat, they kind of expand what you can do. So each one of them comes with a specific kind of resource that they'll start talking to you about. So for example, there's one she's very into sewing, the first one you get, and she helps you build like a loom for your boat, so then you can start gathering different fabrics and making different thread. Whereas another person's into woodworking, so you can start cutting down trees, then you can build the wood mill or whatever you do, and you can cut them into planks and start building stuff with that. So for every new character you get, you begin to use different resources differently, or you can start unlocking new kind of buildings for your ship, and you kind of over time expand, and you have a bunch of different things you're doing. Like now I'm using that loom to sew different threads and materials. I'm using the wood chipper to cut logs up. I'm now crushing stones with a big boulder thing. I have a foundry, so I can
Where does the foundry go on your boat?
Well, that's the thing, right? It's kind of like, you ever play Fallout Shelter? Or like, like you're kind of building that kind of base and choosing where all the rooms go.
Right.
It's kind of like that. And you have your boat's a certain size, and whenever you build a new, facility or a room on your boat, you kind of have to place it within the area that you have, and you can build different expansions, make your boat bigger and bigger, so you have more and more room. But it's kind of like a game of Tetris, figuring out where you're going to put everything. And like for me, I have, everyone's room is going to be over here, and then I'm going to put my garden and my orchard and my kitchen all together over on this side, because I can get all my ingredients, then go cook. And you kind of can move things around whenever you want, and it's a balance between putting things like near where you're going to use them for the same kind of projects versus like where can you actually fit them, because some of them are very big. Like I have a windmill in the middle of my boat, which is good for it, like grinds up corn into flour and whatever, and then I can use that for cooking later on. But it's a huge windmill. Like you got to build around it.
Right. And I'm sure part of the appeal too is also like, because it's such a visually striking game, you want to make a nice looking boat and like kind of add some of your own like personality to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. There's not a lot of customization in terms of like you can't change the look or like or stuff like that. But it's very much like, I guess you can set it up in some cool ways if you want, I guess. But so every character you get comes with not only like a new building you can make, they also have a special house they want you to build for them and do different things. Like, I really want a desk in my house because I like to read, so you got to go gather the resources to build the desk they want. And the gameplay loop is basically, you're on a map, and you choose a location on the map, and your boat will sail towards it. And while your boat is sailing, it takes anywhere from maybe, depending how close you are, it could be like a minute to like 5-6 minutes, it feels like sometimes. And while your ship is moving, that's the chance you have to go and talk to everyone on the boat, see if they're hungry, make them some food, give them a hug to increase their happiness, so they'll start doing jobs for you. Like the person that likes to sew, she'll then start using the loom and making the thread for you if you have the resources. And you're kind of just doing all these little management things like, okay, I need to cut this wood while I sail here, pick these berries, water my plants, and then I'm getting off the boat to go to this new location. Then you'll go gather more resources there, talk to whoever's on the island. Then you'll go back to your boat, sail somewhere else. So you're just constantly traversing to different parts of the map to gather resources, to build things, to gather more resources. It's one of those kind of loops.
Right. So yeah, it's very much like at its heart, I guess, like kind of like a sim game.
Kind of. I mean, the other part of it is that there's the storytelling is really touching. Like it's obviously spirits going to the afterlife, so there's a lot of themes of like death and did you fulfill your life goals, and what have you learned that you're going to pass on to Stella, the player character? Like, what have these characters learned throughout their life, the advice they're going to give to her? And if you take a second to relate some of the characters to like your life, it actually is quite profound, or like, I think it's got a lot of like nice little life lessons if you kind of read the dialogue and pay attention to what they're saying. Like there's one character that had dementia, and it was quite a touching story around that character. I don't want to give any spoilers since the game is so new, but it's definitely, it's more than just it's more than just the sim aspects. It's a lot of it's very the story, I think, is actually the strongest part.
That to me is really interesting, and that makes me a lot more interested in playing the game, because the demo was a very small snapshot, but it introduced a lot of like the different things. Like there was fishing at one point, and there was like traveling and going to the towns and how to talk and cook, and there was a lot more, I thought, emphasis on how to play the game and how kind of the mechanics sort of work. And I was surprised in the demo for there not being, or at least the way I felt, wasn't a lot of like actual dialogue with the characters and like any kind of like connection with them, which was what I kind of like expected the game to be. And I was disappointed and thought it was more of just kind of like a, you know, a relaxing like management sort of game almost. Yeah. But knowing and hearing you say that the story is actually a big focus, that interests me a lot more and makes me more tempted to actually like pick it up and look into it, because like that's to me what is interesting about the setting.
Yeah, the story is definitely more of a story game than a sim, and I'm surprised that they did it that way, because I think it sounds a bit misleading. Like, I guess you do spend more time on like the sim kind of mechanics and like the crafting and the collecting, but it's definitely not what keeps me coming back. Like, individually, each resource is kind of like a little mini game. So if it's like you know, press X as fast as you can, or like press X on a timer, or hold this. If you're doing the melting the metals down, you have to keep the temperature within a certain parameter or something. But none of those games are actually very enjoyable on face value. And to be honest with you, after playing this game, it's a long game. Like it's almost 30 hours. Like,
oh wow.
Like I've not completed it yet. I think I'm getting quite close to the end, just because I can just tell I'm getting close to the end based on like the resources that I have and how like my upgrade tree is going. But it's a lot longer than I thought. And honestly, like, if it wasn't for the characters for overall being so strong, I feel like there's a few misses in there for sure. I think some are more interesting than others, but like the mechanics themselves, I'm getting kind of like tired of them now though, because they're all quite simple and tedious after a while, especially if you need like a large quantity of a certain resource. So I kind of feel like now I'm playing it just to get to the end of the story, but I'm not necessarily enjoying like the moment to moment quite as much as I was at the start.
Right. So you're not at the point where you're like, fuck it, I'm just going to YouTube the ending.
No, I'm not there. Like,
you're also kind of like sort of anticipating and hoping for it to sort of conclude.
Yeah. And I think part of it's my fault. Like, I was trying to play it in time to talk about it on the show. So I was trying to really cram it in, but of course like school started up and I've just had a few things going on. I haven't been able to play as much as I would have liked. Watching the Stars games, of course. They're in the Stanley Cup final, everyone. Oh my God.
I'm surprised we made it this long without getting that shouted out.
I just realized I didn't give the update, but with all that happening, like, I haven't played as much as I wanted to. So I'm near the end, couldn't quite finish it off. But I would totally recommend it. Like, it's so grounded, I think, in like, even though it's obviously like anthropomorphic animals in a very unrealistic kind of fantasy setting, it's got some really relatable life kind of points in the story that I think are really powerful and people will get a lot out of it. But yeah, like I said, I would definitely play it over a more extended period. Like, if you picked it up, I would say play it in the background while you're playing like one or two other things, just here and there, and don't push it into such a tight time window. I only have a couple of criticisms though beyond that, which would be that the map system, I think, is, for a game with so much navigation, it could be improved by a couple things. So the way it kind of works is you go to your map room on the boat and you have a big map on the wall and you kind of click a spot and then you get taken there. Your ship will start traveling by itself. You don't have to steer the ship. It moves by itself. Right. You just got to pick on the map where you want to go. But which is fine. Like, it works out okay, except for the fact that once you get kind of a few upgrades of your ship and you can move past the icebergs and you can go through the rocks, and the map gets quite extensive. And unless you remember exactly where each location is, there's no way to find out which one is which unless you actually hover over it. So it makes it like, oh crap, where was Augsburg? Like, I need to go back here. My character has, an errand to run here.
Like, there's no legend.
There's no
legend.
There's no legend, and there's no like alphabetized quick select list of cities you can go to or places. You just have to like remember and hover your cursor over top of whichever one you want. And I'm not playing with a mouse. I guess if you're playing on PC, you could play with a mouse. It might be a little easier, but just trying to remember, like, and it takes me a second to find the place on the map I need to go sometimes, and it's just a little frustrating, especially when there's also a fast travel system, which is you kind of pull up to this weird sea lion guy, and he's at like an Aqua bus stop, and if you go to him, he can fast travel you to a different bus stop around the map. That's great, but the problem is if you go to him for fast traveling, the same map comes up, but it doesn't even tell you the name of the place that you're hovering over.
Oh,
so
no.
So you have to know which is which. And so I've had so many instances where I go to the fast travel location. I'm like, okay, good. I need to go to, let's just say Augsburg again is the one I use as an example. I get to him, open the map, and I'm like, fuck, like, which of these is Augsburg? So I need to then leave him, run all the way back to my navigation room, look at the map.
Like, menu bring
no,
up the
there's
map
no map
either?
in the menu. So you have to then run all the way back to the other room on your ship, look at the map, remember which little island is the one you need to go to, close the map, run all the way back to the guy that fast travel, and then talk to him and go there. Like, it's just a little bit cumbersome. And like, once you, like I said, have the map opened up so much, you might have to go back somewhere you haven't been for like 5-6 hours, and you're not going to remember which little spot it is. Like, they don't stick out enough. No one location is memorable enough to like where you would know it unless you've been there several times. So it gets a little tedious in navigation, especially at the end when I'm just really trying to like, I'll just not like do this last side quest. I'm just trying to get this guy's quest done, but now I need to go back and get, I'm out of iron ores, so I got to go back to one of the first locations to get iron. Where's iron? I got to open the map. Which of these places has iron? Okay, which one was it again? Like, go back to the fast travel. It just, you can see how it would get frustrating.
Yeah, it's balancing that. It sounds like it's balancing that tightrope of being like kind of like an immersive sort of like nice atmosphere that you want to be in, and you don't want to just be in menus all the time. Like, you're sort of like a part of the world, but then also like, that's really tedious and time consuming, and like it would be nice if there was just a quicker, simple way to do it.
All they need to do is add a list of places alphabetized, and you can just choose a name from a list instead of picking the location. That's all it would need to be. So that's something I would really say they need to improve. But other than that, like I said, it's been awesome. The game looks beautiful. I know you mentioned before it looks kind of like a Disney Pixar. I took away that it was almost like a coloring book type world. Like, it looks like a kid's coloring book or like a 2D kids kind of watercolor cartoon almost. Like, the water, the reflection they make in the water, like of your boat as you're sailing by, is just beautiful. And there's so many times where the sky will change color, or there's just different colors and different animations of the characters like hugging each other. They're just so heartfelt, and it really is believable that you're in like such a beautiful world. There's nothing that takes you out, no like bad textures, no inconsistencies. It's really beautiful. The music goes along with it really well also. One thing I didn't mention, I won't talk too much about it, but each character, along with like building options, they also open up like a mini game you can play with them. So one of them, like shooting stars, will come from the sky, and you can collect those shooting stars in bottles, and they're like a resource you can use to make things. But when you're collecting them, shooting stars, like hitting your ship, and this music happens, and it becomes like, the first time you see it, it's like very exciting and very cool, and just the way that like the look and the sound and the feel and everything come together is like, it's like really, really cool. And I can easily see this being not in the game of the year contention, but like the honorable mention people kind of talk about before they go into like The Last of Us Part 2, or like their actual contender. Like, like this is definitely going to be. This
kind of stands out as something that's like memorable or unique in some kind of way.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's if Untitled Goose Game can get as much hype as it did last year, and like Bug Snacks can get, like, this is definitely, I would say, from what I know, like much better and deserving of like awards than that. So.
Well, You've inspired me to maybe kind of like revisit it again in the future, because it was very like up and down. I was really kind of like looking forward to it, and then I didn't dislike the demo, but it made me think that, this isn't what my expectations were, and I think it's not really something for me. But now I'm kind of back up on top of that initial point where I'm like, ooh, actually.
No, I recommend it for sure. Like, I actually have been playing this on Xbox Game Pass. Yes. We're a PlayStation show, right? But I like, nothing wrong with Xbox. Why does it have to be a fight,
Exactly. We can all get along and love each other.
Yeah, and I signed up for that $1 for the month of Game Pass on PC just to actually play Spiritfarer. Like, that was my intention, so it worked out perfectly. I will talk about one other game here before I let you have your turn.
Yes, you must. It's the rule, because you had an exciting PS Plus game for September.
Oh, God. Yeah, so for those that don't know, or this is your first time listening to us, we pick a PS Plus game every month. There's usually 2 that come out. We both pick one to talk about on the show later in the month. So in our first episode a couple weeks ago, I'd selected PUBG, and Kate selected Street Fighter V, which are the 2 PS Plus games for the month. So yeah, I played some PUBG. So here's the thing, like, I like Fortnite. Fortnite's pretty fun. I don't like the dance culture type thing necessarily, but like the game itself is good. I love Apex Legends. That's by far my favorite battle royale. Yeah, it's great. Warzone, Call of Duty, I've played that a little bit with some friends too. Like, I think it's behind the other 2, but still fun if you're with some friends for like an evening, right? A couple hours. So PUBG, I've actually wanted to try PUBG for quite a while, because it was, I guess like one of the first, if not the first, like big battle royale.
Yeah, it's
type
kind of
things,
like,
right?
you know, it's got its roots pretty deeply ingrained.
Yeah, and I mean it's still well liked, I guess. Like I mean I don't really keep up with it, but this game was such a letdown, man. Like this game, I'll start by saying like I can totally see why when this was the first one on the market or the first big one, or you know, everyone's entry point to battle royale, I can totally see why this would draw you, because it's cool. Like it's the same premise. You got all these people on the map. You're trying to kill each other. But aside from that, like it's just been surpassed, I think, after playing the other big battle royale offerings. Like I'm not usually someone who harps on graphics or like that kind of, like I just don't really care so much about, you know, some people are like, oh, but the graphics are so nice. Like I need, like for me, it's like as long as it doesn't look like shit, like I don't really care. But this game looks like crap. Like it looks like, no joke, it looks like a mid-range PS3 game in my opinion. Like Skyrim's graphics would be an apt comparison on PS3. Like it just doesn't look good. The textures pop in like crazy. Like when you're dropping from the plane at the start of the map, like you fly over the map and you're dropping down, like I didn't even know where the hell I was going because nothing loaded on the map below me. So I couldn't even see, like I just dove out of the plane skydiving, and like 5 or 6 seconds later, like this like giant building pops in. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going there. Like I had no idea.
Oh no,
like,
I've crashed.
It just didn't work. Like it seems like it's just so unoptimized, and it has, if you know what I mean, like it has that PC kind of look to it.
Yes.
Like Counter-Strike or like.
Yes, I was literally just thinking that in my mind. Like it's like a PC kind of like visual. But I was like, I don't know how to describe that. But yeah,
it just looks like that, right? And it just. I guess there's nothing wrong with it. Like it just doesn't look good. Like to me, there's a base level of like decentness it needs to look like these days. And whatever, just the graphics. I got more.
Wait, before you move on, I just want to point out, like, I'm thinking about all those memes online, and I'm pretty sure PUBG is the game, or if it isn't, at least it's relevant. But it's like the meme where it's like someone's like hiding, like laying down, hiding in grass, but then the other person's like, I'm playing on low settings, so like I don't see the grass, so they just see someone like laying down in nothing.
Yeah, that's totally the experience though. Yeah. Like I had someone I saw running over a mountaintop, and like sure the trees had loaded in and stuff, but I'm sure they were trying to hide behind some bushes, because as I walked closer to them, like stuff started popping in, so I don't think they'd be running through otherwise. But like the sound too, like the sound is, it's fine. Like, but if I was to say, hey Kate, like go and look up some stock sound effects for like an assault rifle, you'd open up like whatever, like a generic assault rifle sound, and that's like what this sounds like. Or everything just seems so stock and no personality beyond like this is the military like kind of thing. And I guess if you're really into that, like it's good. And there is a couple things you can do in this game. Like you can peek around corners and kind of like switch over like which shoulder you're looking over for your gun. So maybe if you're like really tactical and hardcore and like play with a squad, you can look around corners a bit more efficiently, I guess. But like, I don't know, like that's the only thing I can really think that this game has that other ones don't.
Well, if you've ever been playing one of the other games, you're like, I can't peek around this corner. You know what to do.
It's such a sad thing to mention, but like I was just trying to look for something that I identified as cool.
I think to me that this is a strange one, and I might be wrong here. I might be totally talking about it out of my ass. But I remember when it came out, like it had a really long like alpha or beta, and I think it was a small team too. I think like
I really don't know too much about it, to be honest. It might have been.
And maybe unless I'm misremembering, I think it was kind of a smaller team, and it was sort of an ambitious project that took a long time to kind of like find its place. But to me, it's a strange thing to have on console, because like you mentioned, like even just with the looks of being PC, but it really like strikes me as like, yeah, kind of like what Team Fortress, is that the one I'm thinking of? Like it's one of those kind of like hardcore sort of like niche kind of games, like a Counter-Strike thing. Like I feel like not a lot of people who are really into that sort of niche or would be like the kind of people that would be comfortable playing on a controller on a console.
That's the other thing too, just to get into the controls. That's the last thing I have to say about it. Stick with me. Since you knew what I meant by like PC graphics, I feel like you will. This game, like we said, it's clearly like a PC thing. I don't know how to describe it other than saying this. It plays like a PC game on a controller. So when you're moving your left stick around, it feels like WASD. And then the right stick feels exactly like moving your mouse. Like I know that any third person game kind of has that same setup as far as, left stick moves the character, right stick is camera. But for some reason, I think it's maybe the way that you can envision like moving your mouse around a 3D object in a game like that, and it just moves a little differently or feels a little differently than like having a stick. I think it's because when you move like the camera in a third person game, like think Uncharted or God of War or something, like your character will turn along with the camera turning. But in PUBG, you can almost spin the camera to be completely sideways to your character before he'll like turn. And I know there's some games on console that do that as well, but just to feel it just feels like using a mouse and keyboard.
That's really interesting. I know a lot of like shooters too that come out on multiple systems and like PC and consoles. Like sometimes they make slight adjustments for the console version. Like they'll make it so like not that there's like tons of aim assist and stuff, but it kind of does sort of like lead you a little bit more to make it easier to aim because you don't have that exact same precision.
It's not that though.
On a controller.
It's weird. Anyway, that's all I got to say about PUBG. I've gone on for far too long. Tell me what you've been playing, Kate.
Well,
I have. We're nearly 26 minutes in.
Well, I'll get my PS Plus game out of the way as well because I'm a little bit cold on mine. But I don't think it's because of the game itself, more just it's not really my kind of thing. But as James mentioned, the other PS Plus game was Street Fighter V. And this is a special version. This is the Championship Ultra Turbo Super 2.5 like perfect edition, like
bonus EX
Last Shadow. So anyway, it's Street Fighter V, whatever iteration it is now. And I played a little bit of Street Fighter in the past on PC. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. Like this game has some different features and some, balance changes that the new versions always come with. And they've added in a few things here and there and some different modes that are really nice. But largely I kind of knew what I was getting into. The weirdest thing, my first impression with it so far is that you can't carry over your account from PC to PlayStation, which I thought was strange.
Cross progression, I guess, isn't.
Yeah, there's no cross progression. And like it's fine. I was fine like starting like at 0 if I, had a rank, and probably it would be in my benefit to start at 0 instead of my like negative rank. But it gets you to sign in the first thing you do when you open up the game. It's like, please put in like what you want your fighter ID to be. Like, perfect, I have one. Like, oh no, that one's already taken. You can't use it. So I had to make
couldn't use the same account?
No, I couldn't use. So I had
God.
to remake an account. So if you've bought like cosmetics or like stages or stuff on a different game, you can't bring it over, which I thought was kind of strange.
Yeah, that sucks.
So that kind of sucks. But getting into the game, it was like perfectly fine. Like I don't really have too much to say about it because I think fighting game genre is one of those things that you're either into it or you're not into it.
Yeah, you have the games you like. Like if you like Street Fighter, chances are you probably will like this one, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's almost more of like an in-depth conversation if you're into fighting games, like the nuances and the difference between all of the different games versus like, do you like fighting games? Yes or no? And if it's a no, then like Street Fighter isn't going to stand out differently than like, Mortal Kombat or like any other fighting game, really.
Yeah.
I think the only exception is Smash, which is just really its
but that's
own
a
thing.
whole different.
But we won't get into that. But yeah, I did. I played a few matches. I picked up Ken, who was my character, because he was cool and simple, and he's got banana haircut, which is
Those
always
are all
fun.
great reasons.
And I played a couple matches online. I didn't go into a lot of the other modes, but it has some cool single player stuff now. Like there's a boss rush mode, which is new. It's got some like older arcade modes, which like as far as I could see had different versions of like previous Street Fighter games, which I think is really cool and like a nice added bit of content to get. But I just kind of stuck to online. I set it up to say like ranked or unranked, like whatever your preference is. I don't care, I'm new. And like I played a couple matches with people. The online was actually pretty good. I was sort of
You'd hope so. The game's been out long enough they can optimize it.
I was kind of tentative because I was playing on Wi-Fi, which I will admit is apparently a horrible thing to do. There's the whole like in that kind of scene they talk about Wi-Fi warriors and like you're an asshole if you don't have a hardwire connection.
But I mean, you're playing for fun though with the low rank.
I was like, oh
Give
God,
it a
I hope
break,
this
people.
is okay. And it was fine. I played a couple matches and none of them had any sort of issues that I could detect. So hopefully
Watch on your end, it was like that for the other guys. Like
that's
you're
right. The other guy
teleporting all
was
over.
just like was like freaking out. But no, it was good. And you know, I think it was fine too because they have a really good system I like in Street Fighter where you play against someone and then you both have the option to do a rematch. So I did that with a couple people and it was, you know, it was kind of nice. One guy I beat him, the only guy I beat, he was really bad, which is saying something because I'm really bad, but I beat him and then he was like, no rematch, I'm out.
That's awesome.
Which was kind of fun, but mostly I got my ass kicked for a little bit and like, I think maybe it's the kind of thing where it would be fun to play if I had a friend who was at my level.
Yeah, and it's very much, I think the two things would be you'd have to have a friend at your level and you'd have to be on the same couch, not online.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Like a friend at my level, and maybe I would play a little bit because I now own it for free. But it's just it's something that requires a lot of time and dedication to get good at. And if you're just playing exclusively online, it's a kind of a different experience than playing like casually. So I don't think I will continue
That's both of us.
to play Street
Let's
Fighter.
never talk about September's PS Plus lineup again.
But hey, neither of us had to play Farm Simulator.
I think I might have rather played Farm Simulator than PUBG.
That is rough.
We'll keep that for the people that like it. But yeah, tell me about something better.
Okay,
here,
we'll get on to
please.
something positive. I want to talk to you. I finished this last weekend, Salt and Sanctuary.
Right.
Which you may have remembered. I did speak about it on the show, but I have some final thoughts that I want to go over now that I've got the complete experience of the game. So if you're not familiar with it, it is the 2D Souls-like Metroidvania. It's got all the usual trappings of things like an interlocking world, emphasis of exploration, tight, rewarding combat, big boss battles, all that good stuff you'd expect from, you know, a game with those two monikers. I would say overall, I really enjoyed the game and I would recommend it to anyone who's interested in that sort of style of game. And I would say with a specific caveat, especially if you have a co-op partner. This game we played fully in co-op. So I know a lot of like Dark Souls, you can like summon in people and you know, you can play large sections of the game with someone, but it's sort of tedious. You need multiple copies.
Yeah, it's not that true experience.
Yeah, it's not a true co-op experience, but this we played 100% of it co-op. It was really nice to, you know, just have this sort of style of game with that aspect to it. And it worked really nicely in terms of like there's a lot of really good build variety in this game. So both of our characters were quite different. We both kind of multi-classed a little bit.
Yeah, I know you were saying last time you used, what was it? I can't remember now. I was just going to say that. I asked you what you used last time.
Yeah,
now I can't remember. What is
exactly.
it, short swords? No, that's not right.
Yeah,
Daggers?
so we kind of switch around a little bit. It's got a pretty extensive skill tree that's really nice and kind of it does allow you to sort of respec a little bit if you change your mind partway through. But my character is kind of like a roguey assassin with like a, you know, like a quick sword.
Like a little blade.
And then I also did, I'm also a paladin and had like holy magic. Whereas Matthias went more of like a full-on mage with a kind of like a big heavy greatsword. But by the end, it was funny. He got this weapon right at the end and it's a giant pair of scissors.
Hell yeah, that's my weapon right now.
It was really funny. They were really heavy, so we couldn't like wield them properly. So we spent like the last little bit just like pumping up endurance so we could carry this like stupid big pair of scissors. But it was really nice and it was fun to build those characters and kind of almost like see if we could complement each other.
Yeah. So have your thoughts changed from before now that you've beaten it, or how are you feeling?
My thoughts are pretty similar. I was very positive about it before. I think I do have a couple imparting things that I'd like to give, and I think this game is fantastic and I highly recommend it. I think it's wonderful, but I also feel like it has some things where it just kind of falls short of its potential. And I would have liked to see maybe if they make, you know, not necessarily a sequel. I don't think this game needs a direct sequel, but the studio made another similar styled game. Some things that they could, you know, kind of like improve on in the future or use what they've learned to kind of craft an even better experience. So kind of going back to the co-op, a small warning I would give is we found the co-op to be rather easy. So like this is one of those games where it doesn't have tons of information online. It's quite a small studio. It's relatively newish and like, you know, like most of the information comes from people like investigating and like testing out things to find numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
So according to the wiki, it does scale the health and damage of all enemies, but I'm not sure to what degree. But there were a few bosses, particularly in the mid-game, where we just absolutely steamrolled them. No, we're both relatively familiar with the kind of like the Souls-like-esque games. Like, I've played a lot of them. Matthias has played, I think, just Bloodborne, but he was, he did a really good job at it. He was good. It sort of stuck with him really well. So that might be part of it. And it never felt easy to the point of being like really trivial, but it also just didn't hit those big highs that you get in these style of games where you feel like you overcome a big momentous challenge. So I don't know if that's something that would be different playing single player.
Yeah, that's too bad. I don't know. I feel like it's a hard balance to strike with the difficulty, and that's one thing that FromSoft always does so well. I feel is that they can just somehow always hit that challenging yet, people always say it's challenging yet fair, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think a studio trying to replicate that but isn't them can maybe not have that same level of consistency, which I feel like maybe is what happened here.
And this is definitely a smaller studio. I think they did a great job, and they definitely got the fair part of it really well. One of the biggest strengths of this game is I think it's got a really good consistent quality and polish. It's very responsive. I never once felt like I wasn't in full control of my character, and like if I did die, I knew exactly what I got hit by, and like, oh, I should have dodged this way, or like, oh no, I was greedy and went for one last hit. Like, it definitely has that sort of like quality of it being like
it's
really
fair to you,
well
right?
made.
It doesn't. You don't feel like you've been clipped through a wall or
yeah,
stuff like
exactly. But at the same time, like, it just didn't have that kind of like, oh, I overcame a really big challenge. It was just, we kind of like went through it quite quickly and had a really good time, which isn't a bad thing. It's just, and it's not quite the exact same expectation that you sometimes get from that genre. Mm-hmm. But it was always fun. Was always motivated to explore each area. The atmosphere in particular is really, really top notch in this game. And I will say, well, there are no parts that stood out to me as bad or lacking in quality. I think one of the weaknesses of this game is a lack of variety, as well as those kind of underutilized potential of some aspects. So it has a dual currency system, which I think I spoke about in the first episode as really thinking it was a neat thing.
Yeah.
There's gold, which is in addition to the more traditional like salt or souls currency. But the gold is only really used to buy items, which are only relevant in like the early stages of the game. So we felt like we were short on gold for a while and kind of having trouble buying these items. But then once we hit a point in the mid-game, there was nothing ever to use our gold for. The items we'd surpassed and were useless to us, and then everything that handled progression, such as leveling or like
like stat trees and stuff.
Yeah, stat trees and any sort of like weapon or equipment upgrades were all done with salt. So like it had this dual currency, but one was completely irrelevant. So I thought like, well, that was a really good idea. It maybe could have been utilized in a more substantial way.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to when I played Ratchet and Clank for last time, and the way that they use the bolts and the raritanium to like purchase weapons and then the other one to upgrade is such a great system.
Yeah, exactly.
It seems like they could have maybe done something more like that.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was a good idea, and it wasn't. It didn't make the game negative in any way to have those two, but it felt like there was a bit more potential there that they just didn't grasp. And then the other thing is there were a few standout areas that were really good, but a lot of them felt a bit similar, and there was maybe a little bit lack of variety in the game. Especially with enemies and bosses. So, like, not that they were the same thing recycled over and over again. You didn't fight the same boss twice.
Yeah, it's not like color swap or something.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just the same enemy in every single place. But rather, it just kind of felt like the best tactic for most of the fights is to just roll behind the enemy and then hit them from behind. They turn out to hit you. You roll behind them again and, like, just wash, rinse, and repeat until they're dead. So I think this is largely a limitation due to it being 2D. They just have less kind of, like, things to work with.
Yeah, there's less variables, I guess, right? Than a 3D space.
Exactly. Like, you have a very similar moveset to something like Dark Souls, but in Dark Souls, like, okay, you can dodge, through them or backwards, but you also can kind of go to the side, which changes things, even though it seems like such a small detail. And then those games are so good as well at incorporating your environment a lot more. So like it'll be like, okay, now you're fighting in a really small room and that changes things, or like now you're on like a narrow bridge so you could fall off. And in a 2D you can't really emulate that because you're just kind of on a flat plane. Like there's some, some times that were memorable where there were archers kind of posted above and they're sort of raining down arrows at you while you're fighting something below. And there were some neat enemies that kind of interacted with each other. Like one in particular shields other enemies, so you have to kill them first, but they try to evade you. And like there were definitely like some things, and especially some bosses too, that stood out as being very memorable. But I think a lot of it just kind of felt like there's one way to play that's sort of the best thing to do. But with that being said, the final area and the last couple bosses in particular were really good. So it did end on that climactic note, which I think is really important to have that kind of like good lasting impression for a game. And the story, while it wasn't incredibly fleshed out, it was interesting, and I think it wrapped up really nicely. There's kind of a few different endings at the end of the game, and sort of it depends where you've kind of like chosen to progress.
That's it. I didn't expect that would be part of it.
Yeah, like,
progress in terms of like dialogue choices, or in terms of
sometime there's one ending in particular that we got, which we were really happy about, that depends on like an NPC you can kind of interact with. So if you don't interact with that NPC, you don't have access to it. And then the other one is one of the core mechanics of the game, which I won't get into too much detail about since I did speak about it last time, is it has like covenants that you join. So you join up with a different sort of a sanctuary. It's kind of almost like a religion sort of feeling to it.
Those are in a lot of the Dark Souls games as well.
Yeah,
I believe, right? So
exactly. Like those are things you join. They're almost more like quest line sort of stuff. But in this, it sort of changes like what your sanctuaries, which are like the little like safe hubs are, where your bonfire is and you can do your leveling up and stuff. So it changes those slightly to like what kind of like health items you get, and they're a little bit different too with like what your vendors will sell. So there are some nice gameplay implications to choosing which sort of like religion or sanctuary you're going to follow. And then it is referenced or like tied in a little bit nicely at the end. It recognizes which one you were a part of, which was really nice. So overall, I think we beat the game in about 25 hours. I think we went through it quite quickly because that's also doing all the optional bosses and areas. Yeah. So I think it was the perfect length. It does boot you into a New Game Plus, which maybe eventually I'll do, but I'm going to take I'm comfortable with how much I've played now, and I think it didn't overstay its welcome.
Well, now you got something else to play now.
Exactly.
Too, so.
I have a few other games in this genre to look forward to, but overall, I would really recommend it. My positive feelings stayed throughout the whole game. I think it's great. I think it's exceptional if you have someone to play co-op with, and I'm excited to see what Ska Studios does going forward.
Nice.
So yeah, that's kind of the main game I've been playing. I did have one other game I'd like to talk about, and I know that you in particular will be excited for this one, but I have stumbled my way into The Breach.
Oh man, you ain't gonna leave anytime soon either. I recommended it to you a while ago. I picked it up on Switch when it first came out, and man, like it's the kind of game you just fall into a hole and play like endlessly for 2, 3, 4 days, and then you kind of come out, or at least for me, and then every 2-3 months I just go back in and put like a bunch more hours in. Like it's just endlessly replayable, I feel.
Yes, I've been absolutely kicking myself. This is a game I've had recommended to me so many times by so many different people, and I just never gave it the time of day. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it was just like I'm not really into like the mech kind of stuff, or like if it was the setting that put me off, or like what. And I never played, and like, man, am I an absolute idiot. Like
I feel like the thing that with this game is that when you look at it, it's got, in my opinion, good graphics. Like it looks attractive to look at, but I think it looks way more simplistic than the gameplay is. Yeah. And so you can, unless you actually touch it and see how it interacts and how it moves and what the mechanics are and how complex it is, I think it's easy to write off by like looking at screenshots. It's just like, oh, it's another Final Fantasy Tactics or like turn-based strategy kind of thing, even though it's like remarkably more unique than a lot of those, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the case. I think it's one of those things you can't really like fully understand what you're getting involved into until you actually wet your feet and try it out. So I think I would almost describe it more as a puzzle game than a turn-based strategy. Totally. So for anyone who isn't familiar and really has made some questionable life decisions, this is your chance to turn it around. So you have a team of 3 different mech units, and each unit has various powers and abilities. And you're kind of on this small little like grid-based map. and you've different buildings and things that you're trying to protect from this alien bug invasion. So the kind of like the niche this game has is it tells you exactly what all of the enemies are going to do every turn, where new enemies are going to spawn, any kind of like map or environment hazards you need to be aware of. And then the gameplay loop comes from you using limited resources to mitigate the destruction they can cause and like outlast a certain amount of turns. So that sounds all very overwhelming.
That did sound overwhelming, I'll tell you.
But like this game is addicting. Like every time I take a bad turn or I lose a match, I immediately think like, oh my God, like how did I overlook that? Like I've got to play one more and like I'll get it right this time. And like it's just got so much of that like, okay, I'll do it again but better. And like each map only takes like a few minutes.
Well, depending how you think of it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the interesting part is because your goal of this game is not to keep all your characters alive or to like kill all the enemy units. It's to prevent damage to the buildings in the area by any means necessary until like the timer runs out. And there's like side objectives for each mission also, but the amount of time you'll like move one of your units in the way of a shot just to be like a meat shield to prevent a building from getting hit is just such a cool way to think about it, because I don't know of another one of these games where the goal isn't just, defeat the enemy units and keep yours alive. Like this is very different than that. Like you can lose 2 of your units and still pass a match.
Yeah, exactly. Like sometimes the best strategy is to make those sacrifices. Like the game is absolutely fascinating. Like even on like on a psychological level, like it does such a beautiful job of teaching you as you play and like learning how you can interact with the different units. So like some are more combat oriented, like some do just have abilities to kill.
Yeah, there's missiles or punches or flamethrowers.
But like a large majority of them are more utility based, and they manipulate the field in some way, like moving enemies around or like putting down like obstacles or like things or like freezing an enemy.
Lighting something on fire, like a piece of land.
Yeah, and then as you go and you get more experienced, you just realize like that, like sometimes a different approach is the best thing to do. Like, yeah, like you said, like your instinct is to want to try to kill these bugs and like limit the amount of them. But oftentimes it's way more useful to like kind of push them into a weird spot or like manipulate them into doing something. Like if you move them around their positions, they sometimes will just kill each other because like it shows you their attack is going to be like the square in front of them. Well, you push another bug into that square, then all of a sudden they're killing that bug instead of
exactly
fighting something
and that's
else.
Pretty much how you have to play it ultimately, because I don't really think, unless you can make a custom team, so you can put like there's 8 different squads you can pick from depending what you have unlocked. They have different specialties, different abilities, but you can also make custom ones. So I feel like if you were to put a bunch of the attacking ones on a team, you could maybe try and kill a bunch, but more often than not, like you are relying on getting the bugs to shoot each other or moving them out of an attack range or something. Like you're not killing them as often as you're doing the alternate because there's just too many and you don't have enough attack.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like I'm still pretty new, so like obviously I'm learning, but I feel like every time I play, I'm like, I've learned something different. I'm like, oh yeah, like I never thought about it this way, but I can kind of interact in like by doing XYZ, or like this ability seemed like its primary function was going to be for something, but actually like there's kind of a nuanced way to use it. And then that allows me to do like something else with another unit that like kind of fits into it cohesively. And like it feels like an intense chess match as you're playing, and like there's so many times where you get halfway through a move and you're like, oh my god, like you idiot, what have you done? Like you don't understand the implications of what just happened to you. But then when you win, you feel like an absolute like Mensis member.
Yeah, you do. You do.
Like,
you mean Mensa? Mensis is Nightmare Mensis from Bloodborne.
Clearly, I'm not a Mensa member. Clearly, I've got Bloodborne on my brain.
So which team do you have unlocked so far? Like who do you like playing as?
I've unlocked 3 teams. Well, like one you start with, and then I've unlocked the 2 cheaper teams.
Yep. So the
my
orange
favorite
team, right?
team is, I think it's the orange team. They're the kind of like ones that manipulate fog.
Yeah, smoke.
The smoke?
Like, the rusting hulks.
Yeah, that's the team I like the most, the rustic hulks. They've got the best name, first of all.
Yeah, there's like, they have the plane that can jump over things, right? And then...
The plane jumps over things and he leaves smoke where he jumps. So he doesn't do very much damage. And like you also like need a lot of space because like if an enemy's up against a wall, you can't jump over them into the wall. But he jumps, he does damage, and he leaves a trail of smoke, which like disables the enemy for the turn if they stay in the smoke.
And there's so many little mechanics like that where, if an enemy's standing in water, depending who they are, they can't attack. Or
like sometimes they'll just die because they drown, or like some enemies fly so they don't care. And like,
the game really has like its own language of, different terrain types, different are they flying enemy or not? Do they fall off the cliff if you break the ground underneath them? Is there ice? Is there poison? Is there a mine on the ground? Like, it just has so many different... You never have the same experience twice because everything's, always a little bit different every time. And like, the behaviors of the enemies are different. And you have a different squad, even if you're on the same map. Like, it's always... There's no one way you can play the same thing every time. Yeah,
exactly. And when you pair up different characters with other characters, like, the results are drastically different. Like, the smoke in and of itself is just useful because it's a great utility to stall them for a turn. But then you get another unit that pairs with it where he has a passive effect that makes the smoke do 1 damage to something. So now you're creating smoke with your plane, but you're also using this other unit, which does it's totally its own thing, but also means that smoke gets empowered. But then you have to think, well, okay, that also hurts my unit, so I can't end up in the smoke as well. And like, every time you kind of get an advantage, it's also like, but I need to know how this will affect me as well, because I'm following the same rules that these enemies are following. So like, I can push, sure, but if I push an enemy into like the wall, they get hit. But if that also causes my character to get pushed, he'll also get hurt. And like, you're constantly like, there's no possible way to do it 1 turn at a time. You're constantly like, how do I move forward? And like, you're big braining like, okay, I move one character here, but that means I can't do this with the other character. So now I need to come up with like, what are they going to do? And it's just, it's an insane level of like,
it's like pre-planning, but also you can't pre-plan too far ahead because you don't know what the enemies will do next turn.
Yeah, exactly. And like, but then you also like, as you go, you sort of learn that you need to set up, and that just maybe means like making sure your units are positioned well and one isn't just like stuck in the corner of a map because it was useful to kill one enemy this last turn, but now they're stuck all the way over there by themselves. So like, maybe it wasn't worth it.
Yeah,
like,
you're going to take more damage this turn, Yeah, you're totally right.
It's honestly like, it's like math the game, but in the most like intriguing and like rewarding experience possible.
Yeah, it is
like, I can't believe I passed this over. Like, I'm just absolutely like feeling this game so much. Like, I've been playing it for 3 days, and I swear like I'm like looking at the maps in my mind when I go to bed. Like, it is phenomenal. Like, I'm really excited to keep playing and unlock some more of the other mechs and like
they get a lot more crazy as you go. Like, the first one for sure is a very simple team, just standard kind of stuff, and I really like that team you like to play as well with the plane. They're one of my favorites for sure, but I have a couple more that I like quite a bit, and I don't want to tell you like it's to do with fire. You're lighting things on fire and all that. And I just think it's really unique compared to the rest. Yeah, and the game just incentivizes you too. Like, it's way more than just seeing how far you can get. You're also incentivized with little challenges. So every team has specific challenges you need to do with them to unlock more. There's like a currency where if you get enough, that's how you buy the next teams you're missing.
Yes.
By completing challenges. So you can do like a general list of challenges for every team, and then there's team specific challenges. So for the fire team, it might be like kill 3 enemies in 1 match using fire specifically or something like that. But just going through like and checking off every challenge with every team is just another reason to go back, even rather than just trying to beat it for fun. Like, you're also trying to put these challenges on yourself to add even more replay value.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's kind of where I might hit a wall with this game eventually, is when I run out of things to unlock. And like, there are like, the game is, I don't know if we've mentioned this already, but it is technically like a roguelike kind of game. Like, each playthrough is going to be slightly different. You're not playing the exact same maps, the exact same enemy order and position every game. It is sort of like
it randomly generates itself to a point.
Yeah, exactly. It's randomly generated to a point. Like, it's kind of like sectioned into different areas of the map. So like the snowy map levels will always have like the same kind of environments and like types of enemies that show up, and it's just going to be a variation in that one particular match. Like,
and what your objectives will be.
Yeah, exactly how and like yeah, exactly what objectives. And so it is going to feel like each match will never play out the exact same. But they have similar things involved every time. So I think that might be the wall I hit eventually once I've unlocked everything and I have all the different mechs and I've tried out a bunch of combinations and there's not really like goals to be set.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to get there for a while, let me tell you.
Yeah.
This game is fucking hard.
But exactly.
I mean, you can end the game in a few different parts. Like there's 4 islands and technically you can play the final level after completing 2 of the 4 islands, and you can do anywhere 2, 3, or 4. So I've never beaten a 4-island run. Like it's just so hard. And I think like I've played probably like near 40 hours of this, and I'm not even close to completing probably half the challenges still. Like it's just immensely difficult.
Yeah, the game is hard, and then once you're put on the back foot, you're like, how do I just scrape by? Like, how do I salvage this? This is not going well. Yeah. And like, but like you said, and there's tons to unlock. I feel like I'm gonna have a lot of playtime before I get there, and I think it is a little overwhelming at first, but it is simple in how to actually play and control.
Mm-hmm. If you play a couple matches, you'll learn it pretty quick.
Yeah, exactly. And they do a good job of like slowly kind of integrating new things as you go, and it pops up with good tool tips the first time you get to a map, for example, that has like an environmental effect. So like maybe there's like a whirlpool that's going to show up in a turn. It does a good job of sort of like adding these things slowly so that you are pleased about having a new aspect or something else to think about instead of just being inundated with a million things to like get overwhelmed with. So anyway, I'm super happy about Into the Breach. I can't believe I've waited this long to play it.
Well, I'm glad you started. Yeah. Join us after the break, where we will be discussing our featured segment on using guides for video games and then answering some listener mail before signing off for the episode. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show for the second and final segment. That's right, there's a 2-segment show today where we're going to be talking about using a guide for video games. I know sites like GameFAQs, WikiHow, IGN Wiki is so popular these days, especially with like finding collectibles and going through games, getting 100% of the trophies, all that kind of stuff. So it's something a little bit different we haven't really talked about on the show before. Just open it up, I guess. Like, what are your thoughts on guides in video games?
So I've definitely use guides in certain experiences. For me, I tend to use them in specific instances where I feel like they take away some of the tedium of games. Obviously it's your choice, right? It's however you want to experience your game. There's a lot of stigma around like using a guide like you're cheating.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to talk about it, right? Because I think there is that sentiment where it's like, oh, you've got to get good, and if you can't figure this out, like you're less than someone. Like you better not use this guide because I'm better at games than you. Like I don't know. Like I just
that's right.
I don't
My
know
big
if
brother told me how to beat this part.
I don't know if I've ever like met someone like that, but I know like on the internet there's a whole rash of crazy opinions and just like that kind of idea about like how good like that less than kind of mentality, I guess. But anyway.
it does get a little bit silly, and so like. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with using it. I think there's times where it can detract from an experience. So I personally never use them in times where it's something like story relevant or like it might spoil part of like something upcoming that might have been a nice surprise, or like I don't like to look ahead and know what I'm going to be interacting with. I like to experience the game as it comes.
Yeah, so definitely spoiler free. And I'm in that boat too. Like definitely I would never use a guide if it's going to risk me like losing out on a story reveal. Yeah,
exactly. Like I think and I think most games, especially things that are exactly story heavy or like you have to like make decisions throughout the game that might impact things. I think you always get a better experience just going in fresh and experiencing the game for yourself without setting up some kind of expectations or like kind of lessening what would have maybe been an emotional or impactful thing, but you already knew it was coming. Mm-hmm. So I think I don't like guides for that purpose. What I do like guides for are for things that are like kind of outside of that and additional, and like for collecting things or for, like knowing where something's going to be so I don't accidentally miss it. Like I think when they reduce some of the tedium of games, I really like it.
So would you use it for like say you're playing like Salt and Sanctuary? Like, is there any kind of missable weapons you can find or something like that? Like
Salt and Sanctuary is actually one of the games we used a guide for. I think it's kind of like a perfect example for something like this, because in like it extends perfectly to like Souls-like games and that sort of genre. Like, you know, like it's exciting to come up against a new enemy or a new boss and like try to figure out what the best approach is, or like, you know, you go to a new area and the worlds are very like mysterious. So you're trying to like piece together what everything means, and like you're looking for clues, and those are things you want to just have fresh, and it, you know, it's exciting. There's been a few bosses like, oh my god, like this guy's so cool, and like, you know, it's a memorable moment for us playing. So I don't like guides in terms of that sort of stuff, but we did use a guide in Salt and Sanctuary just to see, like, we've completed an area, did we accidentally miss anything?
To eliminate that backtracking later on.
Yeah, exactly. To eliminate that backtracking, to be like, okay, you know, we beat this area, we're moving on, we're done with it, we'll never come back otherwise, but did we accidentally like miss a secret area with a boss or something that like we would have found out about later, or like just never have known about and had missed out on? So I like it in terms of that kind of stuff for like, you know, keeping all my like stuff organized.
Yeah, I can see that for sure, especially like after you've already beaten, like I guess as you're going through, you can use it to find stuff to make sure you don't miss it in the first place. But like for me, I would do it the way where I would probably, like my usual rule of thumb is this, like for game like Spider-Man, God of War, something like that, I usually play through the mainline story, like find what I find. If I miss something, like too bad, I just didn't find it. That's just not part of my playthrough, because I just want to experience the game the way like I want to play it. And then if I like the game enough and I want to extend my experience after I complete, like roll credits, finish the story, then I might pull up a guide and look at the collectibles I missed, or like secret hidden things I've missed after the fact. So that's kind of the way I would do it, but that's like interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for most games like that, I would too, because like a game like God of War, like once you beat it, you still are in the world and can like keep going around. The difference with something like Salt and Sanctuary is once you finish it, you get booted into New Game Plus, so you can't go back and do it after. So that's, I think, why we did it kind of a little bit as we went.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas normally I would take that kind of like, yeah, I'm done, but was there also anything else I can do before I like, you know, put the game back on the shelf or like uninstall it or whatever. The other time I've used it, and it's sort of a weird one, but I'm actually using it right now for Super Mario Odyssey as well.
Okay.
The reason being is this kind of game is, you know, it is just sort of like a fun sandboxy kind of thing. And I didn't use a guide for my main playthrough. I went through each world kind of organically and found all the moons I could, and just enjoyed like being in each world, finding all the things, and then moving on to the next world. But I do have a desire to actually 100% this game.
You're a crazy person.
I know, but I'm honestly really close. But I have a few moons in each world that I missed. And I could spend that time roaming around them aimlessly looking for the moons. But it's been a while since I initially played. I took a really long break, and now kind of coming back, I'm not as familiar with most of the areas, especially some of the early game areas. And so I'm confident that I could find them if I just spent that time.
Right, it's just that convenience.
But exactly, I'm not interested enough to spend all the time when I feel like I've already really like gone through the levels quite thoroughly. So I do have a guide open. Say I'm missing moon 42 in this world and moon 57 and 63. So I just Google where those are. I don't like look up the guide to tell me like the best strategy to get them, but I just, they're here in this quadrant of the map in this specific spot. I'm on my way, and then I'll grab them. So I'm using like that. I don't, maybe that's cheating. Maybe I don't deserve the like whatever.
Well, I would completely say that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
And like I have a few examples too. Like I actually would say, thinking about it, kind of like to prep for this conversation, I actually think I use a guide in almost every game I've played in some capacity. Like I spoke about Spiritfarer earlier. I've been using a guide just to look up like what location has a certain resource, so I don't have to waste my time going over the map over and over. It's like,
right.
where's the gravel, or like where's the stone, whatever you need, right? But I also use them like a good example of this I thought of right away is like when a game doesn't explain its mechanics well enough, I use a guide to like learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So like Digimon Cyber Sleuth.
Oh my god.
One of my favorite RPGs on the PS4. Like it's awesome. Yes. Please play it. But it has like this digi farm system where you can like deposit guys into like a storage area, and they'll kind of level up and have some, you can like grow their stats in there and whatnot. But it doesn't do a good job explaining how that all works. And so I found it was way more convenient and like easier to just look up a guide of like someone explaining how to do this rather than like look at the game's tips and like go through the menu. Like it just didn't work as well. So I think that's a great example of like when a guide is really helpful.
I think that's something that you just absolutely should do as well. And I don't know if I would even consider that like in the same category as looking up a guide. Like technically it is, but at the same time, like the game should just tell you how like what those things do. Like there should be like something in game that explains that. It's a fault of the game. Like you're definitely like not doing the wrong thing by like figuring out how a mode's supposed to work.
No, it's true.
Like,
that's like the most egregious example. Like another time I would use one, like I actually use a guide often when I'm playing Danganronpa or like Phoenix Wright, just for like the courtroom or like the debate sections. And like to me, I'm playing that game completely for the story, and I do try to solve the puzzles and like point out the inconsistencies in people's statements and like present the evidence and all that stuff. But at the same time, it's like I know what I'm trying to say. I know X person is guilty because of Y reason, but sometimes it's hard to know like which evidence to present when or like what statement to question.
You've made it there logically, but you don't know exactly how the game wants you to present that information.
Exactly, right? And I try a few times, like for sure, I present different things, try to point out different things, but if my first couple of reactions aren't what I think it is, at that point I'm just trial and erroring different things anyway, and it's just like saving me that 10-15 minutes to sit there and see the game over screen, present a different piece of evidence the next time. Like you may as well just look it up. You're gonna get it eventually, and sitting there and just brute forcing your way through your inventory, like it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think that doing that kind of thing would really kill the momentum of like progressing the story, especially if you use a spoiler-free guide and it's just like, present the sword on statement 2. Like after a while, it just makes sense to do it that way to me.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's probably like kind of a good example of sort of what my main philosophy, or at least what I'm trying to convey about guides is just it removes that sort of like tedious aspect where it takes you're taken out of the game because you're either like stuck on something where you don't quite understand what you're supposed to do, or something, it's going to take way more time and effort for what it's actually worth, and it just allows you to kind of like progress a little bit more fluidly throughout the game. And in those cases, I don't think you're removing anything. You're not taking anything away. Like,
no, and you're really just improving your experience, because it's not like you're not going to do that event. Like I don't look up a guide as like, if there's an action game I'm playing, like God of War, and there's a boss I'm stuck on, like, and I just can't beat him, I'm not going to look up like YouTube videos of people's cheap like dodging strategies or like exactly when to dodge and stuff. Like to me, I want to figure that out. But if it's something that through trial and error or like persistence I'm going to figure out anyway, just through like eliminating the wrong possibilities, like why would I not look that up? At least to me, right?
Yeah. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Another good example, we had we posted this question on Twitter just to see if you guys had any thoughts, and we did what I thought was a really interesting response from Nate, and he said he actually used a guide recently for Pokemon. And he did so, and I think this is another example of like, games being tedious, is he used it for like just to figure out exactly where to find some of the Pokemon and like some little Easter eggs and like when things are going to evolve, and like also to like, I think I could definitely see it too, like some of the weird evolutions that Pokemon has. Like sometimes you have to, like usually it's levels, but sometimes you have to fulfill these like really weird like requirements. And so he's got like, he even said he has like an app for it for Pokemon specifically that like tells you these like funny little things, and I think that's great. Like exactly, like it's not like he spoiled the story or the experience of Pokemon, but it just made it a little bit more convenient to be like, okay, I want to get like Pikachu. This is where I can catch Pikachu. I'm gonna head there. Yeah, right, and not like wander the map endlessly looking for like where he might be. Absolutely. Another example I have for me, if we're just going to trade back and forth, I do a thing probably once a year or so where I go back and play like a retro old game that, I mean, old as in like I played Super Mario RPG a couple of years ago for Super Nintendo. Okay, I think that definitely qualifies.
Like that's what I mean. Like not like PS3, it's like old, like retro for sure. Right. And to me, it's like I played that game with a guide a lot of the time, and it's not because I just wanted to make it a streamlined experience, like because it's an RPG. It's a little bit long, and like there's a lot of new games that come out that I want to play, and I'm more so going back to look at a game like that, or I started a playthrough of Earthbound a couple of years ago. Also, I didn't complete that one. I'm gonna go back to it, but it's the same thing. Like I use a guide as well, just to kind of get you through it at a quicker pace, because I'm not going back to to play it as if it's brand new, like it's damn near 20 years old or over 20 years old. I'm going back to experience the game because I'd rather play it myself with a guide and just know what to do rather than watch a YouTube playthrough or something. Like I want to play it. I just want to make it easier on myself so I can experience it and go back and like see why it's a classic and all that kind of thing without the extra time commitment of not knowing what to do. So I think that's like my most controversial time to use one, I guess, would be something like that.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Like, especially those older games too, like they're kind of like not necessarily designed as user friendly a lot of the time as like current games are. Like there's definitely been some improvements, like broadly speaking, especially with like older RPGs, and like sometimes they can be a little bit convoluted or, you know, a little bit like awkward to deal with in certain places, and you know, the pacing's maybe not the best. So like, yeah, whatever. If it makes you enjoy the game more,
that's right.
It makes you enjoy the game more. That's fine.
Do you have any more?
No, I think that's all I got. Like I don't use them too often, and the times I do, I think, you know, very much mirror what you've used them for.
I think that's the vast majority of people these days anyway, like, broadly speaking.
The one thing I will say, and I don't do it, but there have been times in games where I've come up with a particularly spicy dialogue choice that I have to make. And I'm like, shit, like, I want to know. Like, the Banner Saga was this big game for me.
I was going to bring that one up, actually.
And there are a few choices in that game where I'm like, holy shit, like, I don't know what to do. I'm at a loss. Like, I'm so, like, invested in how my game's going and, like, what the implications are going to be for this story situation. And I was, like, so tempted to bring up a guide and find out, like, exactly what the consequences will be. And I didn't do it. And I taught myself not to have that kind of like urge to do so. And I'm so glad I did, because it made me enjoy the game so much. I had tons of consequences when I played that game. Characters died. Things went totally different than how I envisioned. Like,
it makes it more personal that way, though. Like, because you could optimize if you wanted, but then it would just be like you didn't get the choices that you didn't see how your choices would play
exactly.
out.
Like there's time where that game, like, you could be putting in tons of resources to leveling a character, and then that character dies based off of a decision you make, and you're like, oh shit, like, not only was that like a character I really, like, you know, really cared about, but also like I invested a lot of resources. Like, I'm gonna have to replace them on my team with some like shittier character I haven't been like speccing into, and like that's tough as a gamer, because like we want to optimize as like a natural thing, but like it is such an impactful and emotional moment, and like I value that more than the consequence, because it's a moment that's stuck with me, and like I'm deeply invested in these characters and what happens to them. And I'm so glad I didn't look up a guide, because even if I end up with more negative results, those results are more meaningful to me because they're genuine and they're what my personal experience was. Yeah. So there are definitely even times where I'm like, I'm tempted. And if you want to use the guide and you think that will make you happier, that's your prerogative. But I think like that's the one kind of time where I would say, don't use a guide. Like, just let it happen. Just see what naturally. Happens organically. Yeah. Exactly. Like, worst case scenario, okay, save scum it then. Like, whatever. But just let yourself like be open to having not always the best results. And sometimes that makes a game more meaningful for you. Yeah, that's. I mean, I couldn't sum it up better than that. I totally agree. I have only one other example for me. Like when I'm using a guide right now, I'm actually using a spoiler-free guide on my Persona 5 Royal playthrough. I want to get the platinum on it. Like, I'm not a trophy guy. I don't usually hunt for trophies, but I love Persona so much, and I've already played like Persona 5, which is, I mean, there's differences for sure, but it's a lot of the same stuff, at least especially for the first part of the game. So I found a really nice, like, vague guide, which isn't telling me how to do anything specifically, but it's just like, hey, there's a trophy for, maxing out your social stats. So you'll probably want to focus on that during, the middle part of the game because there's not a lot going on. Or like, actually it's during the start because there's less confidants to spend time with. Just like general suggestions of kind of what to work on when. And as long as you're like aware of the trophy list and whatnot, it doesn't really tell you anything other than like just kind of what to look out for, and like, hey, make sure you have this done before this part of the game. Do it at your leisure, but just like, no, you have to get it done by now. Just very vague hints, and I'm enjoying that just as kind of like a companion to my regular playthrough, and it's really not affecting it at all. I just don't want to miss like one trophy that I could have
got and have to do like a new game plus just to go get one more trophy at the end or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of like a compromise because, like, yeah, you're sort of like still playing it how you would, but you're just aware of certain like boundaries that maybe you wouldn't know otherwise.
Yeah, and it's not like it spoils anything for the game. Like there's nothing specific in terms of like, hey, there's a hidden thing over here. You got to go look back here, and you wouldn't find it otherwise. It's more so just like general tips of stuff you do anyway. Like Persona is just set up perfectly for that kind of thing. Like the trophy list is really good and attainable, and it's just like a helpful thing. But yeah, I don't know. Use a guide whenever you want. Have fun. Play your games the way you want.
You noobs. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, now that Kate's called all of our listeners noobs, it's time to read some listener mail. Kate, what's
That's
our
right, because
listener mail
we
question?
used to value your opinion, and now we don't.
That's right. So we have some listener mail.
Yeah, we've got a good one. So this listener mail is another question, which is great. We love to, have questions that spark some debate or some ideas. So this one comes from Matthias, and he wants to know like what we think the worst video game tropes are. So we'll let you go first.
Oh God, okay. So we did a section before on bad game mechanics, and I was trying to differentiate this from that somehow because first of all, I don't want to like always have negative topics on the show or something, and like I guess you could conflate like is it a mechanic or is it a trope like for certain things.
Right. There's definitely some overlap, especially when they both come into like. My big distinction I thought was like kind of like, is it a gameplay mechanic? Like, is it gameplay or is it like story?
Yeah.
Like, there's definitely some overlap with certain things, but
yeah. So I've got two I wrote down here. I was gonna have like an honorable mention and one of them be my actual answer, but honestly, like I just can't decide which is more important. So I'm gonna talk about two. I don't know if you want to sandwich them together or what, but I'll just go. So one of mine is the classic, insanely difficult final boss or like. Final boss like ending game sequence, which is like insanely difficult compared to the rest of the game.
Right, like a massive spike
in difficulty in an RPG where you got to grind for 30 hours before you can beat the final boss, even though you got through the rest of the game fine.
Yep, absolutely.
Or I wrote this as an either or though, because there's other games where the final boss is completely trivial and like a fight or a challenge, like the game just kind of ends abruptly. And so I'm just thinking like, first of all, for those games where the final boss gets insanely difficult, like one I can think of is there's two examples I have. One is Sekiro, which I know it's a tough game anyway. It's a FromSoft game, but I know like when that game came out, there was a lot of people online that were just like, "Fuck, like I'm never gonna beat this final boss." Like I remember people saying he was just an absolute, like crushingly difficult monster. And the other one would be Bravely Default, which is when you get to the end of the game, you need to do like a boss rush basically of all the bosses again in a row. And it's just like so like insurmountable. I got
stuck on a boss like and stopped playing like 80% of the way through, so fuck that.
Yeah, so it's just so insurmountable and tedious. And so for those two things, I'm just thinking like, man, like it's just like such an outdated trope. I think of a lot of older RPGs of like it needs to be so hard at the end to pad out the amount of time you need to play the game so they can say it's 60 hours because you're grinding for 10 hours before the boss. And it's like, do you not want people to complete your game unless they do this? Like the average person is not going to want to do that unless they're like this big fanatic and loves the game and is so hardcore. And like, why not just save that for post-game content? Like I know a lot of the Final Fantasy games or I think even Kingdom Hearts as just some examples have like hard challenges to complete post-game to go do like a hidden boss. That's like post credits.
Unlocks like some additional like really tough things to do. I think a lot of games do that, and I think it's a really nice system as some like extra challenge. Yeah,
and then on the opposite hand, there's and it takes away like that also to finish that off takes away from the story climax. Like you're so close to seeing the end. Like, oh, how's this going to resolve? Like this, I've been with this story forever, but now I have to completely derail what I've been doing and go fight random enemies in a cave.
Right,
To
exactly.
get strong enough.
You want to get to the final climax and cutscene, and you're like, well, I'm back in the starting area.
Yeah. So I think that's a trope I really don't like. And on the flip side, like when bosses get way too easy at the end, like or maybe not even easy, but just weird compared to the rest of the game. Like I always think of this with Uncharted, how the final bosses are never like they use mechanics that you're not used, or they're just like quick time events, or they just don't feel like they fit with the rest, and it's like they just didn't know how to make the fight cohesive.
They don't feel like a culmination of everything you've learned up until this point.
Yeah. Or like Fontaine in BioShock is another good one for me, where the fight is just like super easy. Like I didn't find BioShock immensely challenging, but I mean Fontaine was one of the easiest. Like I had more trouble fighting the first enemies
Yeah.
when I first did the tutorial than I did fighting him at the end.
Yeah. Fontaine's a good one, actually. That was almost like, it's almost like the other problem with that is like they're just not very memorable. Like you mentioned Fontaine, and like I thought of him as a character at first because like obviously he's a big character in the game, but it took me a second to actually think about him in terms of like a final boss, because it wasn't something that stuck with me.
And the same way, like I have I don't think you've ever played Gears of War, but like I played Gears of War 2 back in the day on the 360, and I really enjoyed the game. It was fun, like it's a third person cover shooter. And the final boss, you're like sitting in a helicopter just using this powerful gun that shoots from the sky, and like you don't even really have to aim it. And you can't really lose, at least I don't know how you would lose, because it's just like you're using this weapon that you've never seen before that's extremely easy, and you're just basically like what is this? Why am I doing this?
The one guy who's like, shit, I used a guide for the Gears of War boss.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, maybe I'm downplaying it and not remembering it right, but it just seems like why is that what you've chosen as the finale to what's otherwise an amazing experience?
I think so. A lot of these are probably, or at least some of these are probably things that like were intended to feel different and just maybe miss the mark a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time too, like, yeah, like some of these are kind of conscious decisions, and it is unusual.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking like I don't want to go too far into it because we're already running to like nearly an hour and a half here. But like Uncharted Lost Legacy, the end boss fight in that is an amazing fight that uses mechanics that you use throughout the game. And I just wonder, like, they obviously got it right in that one, but why was Uncharted so weird on the bosses before? But anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah. What's
That's a good one.
So
were those both of yours?
No, I've got one more. I'll go over slowly, but if you want to cut in here first.
Well, I've got one that's kind of an honorable mention that I don't want to get too into, so I'll do that first, then we can hear your last one, and I'll close. But it's kind of like, I don't want to get into too much because it's really controversial topic. But I've written down like just kind of and I think maybe it's because I played some Street Fighter in when I was in the training mode, because that's where you go while you're waiting for a match. I was playing against Cammy. Who's that character? She's like the military one with the pigtails. And so I put down like the over-sexualization of a lot of female characters. So like, you know, it's people's preference and everyone's got an opinion on it. And I think like, I don't want to totally bash it. Like I think there's a place for sexual characters. And I think games should try to explore all different types of peoples and situations. But there's definitely games where it just is like a random thing thrown into it that like it doesn't have any other gameplay implications, and it's very much just like a fan service thing.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like fighting games are, off the top of my head, some of the worst for that. Like there's so many fighting game characters wearing like bikinis.
Yeah, exactly. Like Cammy's like a military like person, but she has like a bikini that like shows off basically her entire butt, and it's like you know, like it's just kind of weird. And like I was thinking about it, like, do you remember Quiet from Metal Gear? She was that one of the more recent Metal Gears came out, and you had this character who was in it. Her name was Quiet, and she was a sniper in like the tiniest bikini you've ever seen. And so people question like, what the hell? And the game, the developers actually came out and said the reason she wears basically no clothes is because she breathes through her skin.
Of course.
So that's why she has to wear this tiny bikini. But like, it never actually comes up in the game or is like anything that gets is relevant in any way.
It's just like retconning a reason.
Yeah, it was just sort of a retcon reason. So like, it's not like a huge issue. I don't think I've ever actually stopped playing a game because of it, but I just think it's sort of like kind of an outdated trope to have now, where like
games are for teenage boys and they want to look at girls.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a weird trope, and like I don't think to say that like you can never have a game where like a girl has like massive breasts or something like that. That has its place, sure, but like I just don't think it needs to be like shoehorned into so many games that it is
way over
right
representation.
Now.
Yeah, so, I totally agree.
Yeah, just give Cammy pants. That's all I'm saying.
Please.
Girl's cold.
So my other one, which is, I feel like I picked two kind of like generic ones, but really like I think they're good ones to point out, which is just when you endlessly kill like hundreds of millions of people throughout a game and no one bats an eye at it. And then all of a sudden it comes to, in a cutscene, your character's going to kill like the main bad guy, and he like hesitates shooting and like doesn't do it. Right. And it's just like, how the hell you just murdered like 14 people in the hallway. It's
the Batman syndrome. He like derails a train, killing like hundreds, and he's like, I will never kill the Joker. I would be stooping to his level.
No, it's true, right? And so like I mean, Uncharted is an easy pickings game here.
Yeah, absolutely.
You kill like, you must be like over 1,000 guys on the journey, and then you'll always hesitate to shoot someone at the end or something, And another one, like I found like Infamous is also kind of like this. Like you can play as a Paragon character, or Mass Effect even as well, where you choose like good or bad moral choices. But then no matter which one you pick, you're still like killing innocent bystanders, like that are just happen to be, you know, doing whatever in the world. And I just feel like there's a bit of a disconnect. And it's one of those total video game things where like killing people or like eliminating enemies is so intrinsic to like so many genres of video game that I think it just gets a pass as far as being like, oh, that's just what you do in games, you kill people. But the more realistic games get and the more realistic stories they try to tell, especially in terms of like the big AAA stuff, I feel like they need to maybe change some of that to expand games to like a more broad audience. Like I think about the Avengers movies and how partway through they're criticized, like the Avengers are saving the world, but they're like destroying buildings and towns, and like there must be like millions and billions of dollars of damage and death. And then throughout that the movie series, they kind of began to even drop little lines like, oh, it's a good thing we evacuated this city before the fight, just to let people know like, okay, they're not killing people. And so I don't know how you'd change the mechanics of a lot of games to incorporate this, other than like, I think the Yakuza series is a really great example of this, because when you get in a fight in Yakuza, it's like a street fight, and yeah, you can use guns and you can use some weapons, but you're never portrayed to have killed these people you're fighting. If you just get in a street fight, no matter what weapon you use, they're kind of like injured on the ground, and then they'll always run away afterwards,
right.
Or they'll survive. And then I think it really pays off, because when you get to the part where you find a dead body, or you find a boss and you got your gun to his head, and you're actually sitting there thinking like, shit, like, am I actually going to kill this person? Because you've killed so few people that is actually meaningful. Where you know what I mean? Like if I was out here in Yakuza gunning people and all these thugs in the street died, it would be weird that I'm not killing the head of the Yakuza family that I'm going against. But because I've not killed anyone, it's now more impactful when you do kill someone for the story.
I think that's a fantastic pick. That's really good, because it's definitely one of those things where it's like a lot of games, and especially older games, when it just wasn't maybe things that we were consciously thinking about more, is like they made gameplay and story kind of like separate at times. But like especially with these last generation, I'd say, and like especially big games, like we talked a lot about The Last of Us 2, and like how there's so many implications to like what you're doing in the game, and like things have consequences. Like those things have been merged a lot more in a lot of games, so it kind of stands out even more now when a game like it doesn't really aware or like wants the audience to be aware of everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think like, yeah, you could say maybe like making someone just lay on the ground and then like run away, or like in Pokemon they faint, they don't die. Like maybe those are like quick like shortcuts to get out of it, but at the same time like it's something, and
but it's really believable too.
Yeah.
Like at least like is Yakuza as an example, like I really believe that these people aren't dead. I just like beat the shit out of them and they're laying in the alleyway.
And that's okay.
It's better than murder.
Yeah, exactly. But like, and I think like even if it is just a quick thing like that, like even just to address it is a good thing, and to say like, you know, like there's an in-world reason for this, and like there isn't so much of a disconnect between like the cutscene you're in versus like the actual part that you're playing. That's good. I like that one a lot. I almost like it better than mine.
Well, what is yours? Let's see.
Should have done this backwards. But I put mine, it's a little bit more shallow, but it comes up sometimes. And it's just losing a boss fight in a cutscene after you beat them. I don't like that trope. What do you mean? So like you do a boss fight or something, and then like
I know. Yeah. Okay.
Like you win the fight, but then there's a cutscene immediately after of you like surprise you actually lost the fight.
Right, like the boss will get up and then knock you off the building. Or
exactly.
Something.
I don't like that. I'm all for, and I don't want to group this in, I'm all for bosses that you're not supposed to beat. Like I'm fine if it's a boss fight and you just can't win and it's part of the story, and you know you lose, you have to come back later when you've got some more tools. I think those are cool sometimes. I think those are really cool. They can be really...
if they're done well.
Exactly. I think they can be really impactful if they're done well. It can set a really like strong tone for the game, and really like set up like the next meeting with this character. But there are times when like you can play that game and it is possible to win, and then that just completely derails it. So it's something like I will use like the Souls games are actually a really good example of this, because it's the tradition in those games where at the beginning of the game they usually make you fight something that's like way above your skill level. So like in Dark Souls you fight like a big boss first before you even get a weapon properly, and like Bloodborne does the same thing, and like it's really difficult especially for a new player who's still learning. So you're not really like intended to win. You're supposed to lose and then come back later with some new weapons or something else that like lets you have a more fair fight. But especially if you've already played before, you're kind of familiar with the kind of game, you can win. And it feels great. You usually get some kind of reward. And then you keep going and you get those skills later and you just progress in the game and it's fantastic. It's like a win-win because either you have a cool moment or you just feel really good about beating this hard part. But then Sekiro came along. And we bashed Sekiro a little bit today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if necessarily saying the end boss is really tough is bashing.
Yeah, that's fair. But it's just, I guess, weird coincidence. It's come up twice.
Yeah.
But ironically, like, I don't think Sekiro does this very elegantly. So this is maybe like spoilers for the first 10 minutes of the game.
It's fine. It's old enough now.
It's fine. Yeah. But you go up against a really tough boss fight and you're supposed to lose. You get your arm chopped off and that's what kind of kicks you into getting like your cool shinobi arm. Which is obviously a very important core aspect of the game. But you can beat this fight like the other Souls-like games. You can win, but then the game goes, well, you still kind of need your shinobi arm.
Yeah, it's not like story-wise you have to lose even if you can physically
story-wise, there's no like way of getting around this. So then you beat the fight, and then you get a cutscene where like, haha, I'm not actually defeated. Chops your arm off, and it's the exact same as if you'd lost. And I just think that like it just doesn't feel good as a player. Like it really like takes you out of the immersion and like makes you feel bad for like something that was out of your control.
Right. It's like they shouldn't make it so you can win if you're intended to lose.
Yeah, exactly. If you're intended to lose, that's cool, but then lose. Don't do this like willy-nilly like, did you win? No, you didn't. Like
yeah, I agree with that completely. I think I don't know why people don't like this. My only thing I can really offer, and I didn't know you were going to talk about this, so I don't have like an example, because we do this for real, folks. We don't talk about things before.
That's right.
My only thing I would say is like I appreciate it when games make it clear that you're supposed to lose, or they kind of hinder you in some way, because I think I've had a few experiences, and again, I can't call like exactly which game it is. I think even maybe Star Wars Fallen Order, if I remember from last year. But like, there's sometimes when if you're really good at the game, you can put up like a huge fight in some of these fights, and you're like using down to your last potion and like concentrating so hard on parrying and dodging and like just killing yourself in like concentration. And then you lose the fight and you're like, oh shit, like fuck, I was so close. And then it turns out you're supposed to lose. And you're like, oh thank God, like. And right. Even though you like, if you know you're supposed to lose, it's almost like you wouldn't be so paranoid. And I feel like certain games too, if you use like all your potions, for example, during the fight, like maybe you don't get them back or something. Like you shouldn't be able to like waste all your stuff, then lose on purpose, then have like nothing left. You know, I don't know if there's an example of that, but I don't know. I think it's just like, it's nice when you know you're supposed to lose. Like I always go back to the start of Paper Mario and you fight Bowser near the start of the game.
Yes,
and you're so underpowered. You're not doing any damage to him. He's hitting you for like big amounts. And it's like, man, there's no way you can win this. You can just do the simple math and it's like, you ain't going to win. So you kind of know that you're in for a loss. And I kind of like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of nice. Like to me, I think about it in terms of like, that could have just been a cutscene, but instead it's like something you kind of get to play through as well. But like I said, I think it's good to kind of set up an expectation. In like that paper example, you know there's no chance. Like Bowser's got the star rod, like, you ain't gonna beat him. But then my problem, I guess, is when it's the expectation that like I think I've won and then I haven't.
Or like the story disconnect. Like if you're able to beat him, then you've won. So why all of a sudden did you lose your arm?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like he's dead. He's out of health. He's on the ground. I've stabbed him so many times, and it's like he just gets like a cheap shot in at the end, or like
bullshit.
Oh, he runs away. Like,
yeah. Bullshit. Well, I don't know. Good discussion, Kate. Thanks for bringing that. That's a good one. I like that. I like
yours too.
Thank you. Hey, if you guys have any game tropes that you don't like, you can send them in to us. We'd love to read them. Maybe you get a shout out like Nate did today. So go ahead, send them over. We're at circlesandsquarespod@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at CANDSpod. You can find us on any podcast service or on YouTube by searching Circles and Squares Podcast. We have a whole collection of episodes over on those platforms, including a bonus episode that we released on, I guess it'll be, I'm not sure when it's going up. It's hopefully going to be either really late on Wednesday night or will have been up on Thursday. But either way, go back through our catalog. We go into all the whole PlayStation 5 event that just happened with the price and the release dates and games that were shown. We talk about our pre-orders for PS5, all that good stuff. So check out that episode. But yeah, Kate, anything else? Or I guess we're good to go.
I guess we're good to go.
Wow. It's been a pleasure.
It's been a wonderful night, and look forward to November 12th, everyone.
There you go. Thank you all for joining us again. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you again in a couple weeks' time for episode number 14. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.